I was asked why I didn't just take my camper and drive the 3 hours back to them, instead of living pretty much homeless for so long. And I had to sheepishly admit that I was very attached to living around here, and I had my best employment opportunities in this area. My hometown doesn't have a lot of great job opportunities in my field, if any at all. And I wanted to make my own way as much as I could. An answer they overall accepted. We moved on to having a rather nice party. The best I'd been in years. Some relatives even brought CDs of great Christmas albums. And I have to say, the one my uncle brought of Ray Charles was my favorite. He sings Christmas songs like no one else I've heard. It was a grand and happy time. I felt like for once I could just forget my past issues and enjoy the moment. But I wouldn't be writing this if it had stayed that way. About 2 hours into the party, you know who showed up. My parents, brother and sister-in-law popped in trying to look all smiles. They didn't even knock. Just walked right in my front door like they were meant to be there. I shut off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay and said they brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I got another chance to speak. And he said they don't deserve to be in my home, or my life after the crap they tried to pull months earlier. And he was backed up by several other relatives. Mind you, this guy is my mother's brother. And he used to love her to pieces until he found out about the stuff that went on between me and my parents. My grandparents, mother's parents, as old as they are, hurriedly got in between us and said to my parents that if they want to make amends with me, it's far too soon. And they've never been more disappointed in them than they were this past year. They'd hidden their favoritism for my brother from prying eyes for a long time. But no one was fooled anymore. And they needed to make a serious effort to try and actually treat me like a son if they ever wanted to be in my life again. Then they turned to Dan and sister-in-law, and said they've seen the repetitive nonsense sister-in-law keeps posting about. They're tired of it, and to just let it go already. My house will not become their new home. Sister-in-law went back to her old standard of crying, and had a pity party about how she should be the one living here, and not me. She plopped down in a chair to have a tantrum and say it wasn't fair I got this house to myself when I have no family of my own, and she has 4 kids that need more space. And she just wanted a better place to live in and feel like a real mom. It was petty of me, but I loudly pointed out that she sucks as a mother because she lets my mother do most of the parenting while she sits on her butt all day drinking, playing on her phone, or going out and spending all of Dan's money. And she has the nerve to complain about it. I even joke that I'm surprised her baby doesn't get drunk from her breast milk since she drinks so much booze. Which I admit went a bit too far as I got some stares. And sister-in-law demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I said the evidence speaks for itself. And if she wanted to be able to afford to move out of my parents' house someday, then she needs to put her college degree to some use, get a job, and learn to save money. My mother already does most of the child care for my brother's kids anyway. So she'd have plenty of time after her baby gets a little older. My brother's eldest kid who's 7 years old ran up to start kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mom. And he kept at me about how his mom said that I was the bad guy who made her cry and didn't let them live here. That's when my brother grabbed his son to pull him away. But all the other relatives jumped back in, and this sort of turned into a family intervention against my sister-in-law and brother. She was crying, her new baby was crying, her kids were crying. Hell, even Dan was very nearly in tears from the verbal lashing he was being assaulted with. He ended up just sitting on the ottoman I keep shoes in by the front door and looking like a complete wreck. He couldn't look anyone in the eye, he couldn't even say 2 words to me. Not with a whole house filled with angry people ready to judge him if he tried to let out his inner golden child again. If they weren't there to get in his way, I'd bet this would have ended up a repeat of when he tried to order me around to try and take my house months earlier. By this point though he'd been so thoroughly humiliated that his and my parents' reputation in the family was completely destroyed because the masks were all now off now. Soon after my parents, brother and sister-in-law all left in defeat. The party resumed and we all avoided speaking of what just happened for the rest of the evening. Since most of the adults had been drinking, everyone stayed the night in my house. I even let some of them sleep in the camper so there'd be enough space. I admit, it also makes a good guest house. My relatives all wanted a tour of it earlier as well. And they said they couldn't believe I'd been living in it for around 2 years. I got a lot of questions about it. Like what summer and winter was like, and so on. I was up earlier than everyone else Christmas morning, and had a fresh pot of coffee and some ibuprofen for those spiked eggnog hangovers a few of them had. I was complimented on being a way nicer host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do this again next Christmas. After Christmas sister-in-law did finally stop making posts that were obvious digs at me, and deleted all of the old ones as well. But shortly after the new year, she more recently made a new post complaining about how she'd tried to convince my parents to get a camper like I did, so it could be set it up in the backyard so Dan and his family could use the whole house as their family home. Well, a taste of one's own medicine is never fun. Because my parents turned that idea down, vehemently I hear. No one is going to push them out of their own home, let alone their master bedroom. The post was only up for a couple of days before sister-in-law removed it. And she has hardly posted anything since then. She loves to complain. But if a tree falls and no one is around to hear it, can it still complain? Sister-in-law I guess has realized there's no point in doing it when no one hears her anymore. And Dan can't afford to move his family out on his salary alone anytime soon. If they end up expecting another child in the next few years, I won't be surprised. Things mellowed down for me since then. And I've even invited friends over for a poker night. I suck at poker because I can never remember a damn thing about it. But so what? We get to drink beer and eat junk food while being merry idiots. We all loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King and just had it at the best way 4 grown men can when they just want to have a good unadulterated time and get pissed drunk. I think maybe around summer I'll look into possibly dating someone. I'm not exactly getting younger here. Fingers crossed that goes well. My camper just sits idle in my yard now. And I admit, there were some days I went out there just to spend time in it. I did live in it for 2 years. It's like my second home. And maybe one day I'll actually get to use it for camping, like it was meant to be. I've never been camping. My parents considered it a waste of time. So it'd be a completely new experience for me. This pretty much marks the end of what happened. My parents, brother and sister-in-law have all been staying very clear of me. In fact, they seem to have gone back to acting like I don't exist, like they did before I bought a house. Not like that bothers me at all. It's better that way. But they'll inevitably come back in some way. I know they will. I just wonder what kind of stupid thing they'll do next. If anything notable like all this ever happens again, I'll make another post if this account is still active.